LawFlip, objection, your honor. Turn the game upside down. LawFlip, objection, your honor. Turn the game upside down.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to LawFlip. It's an unfiltered conversation about law, life, technology, COVID-19, everything in between. I'm Benjy, your host. And I want to introduce to you Douglas Kim. He's a tech entrepreneur, executive. He's been doing his thing for 25 years. He's a seasoned veteran in the game, always pushing new boundaries in tech. He has tons of experience in innovation, and he's one of those people that I look to for mentorship and advice at all times, but particularly in times like this where things are uncertain. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to our newsletter, YouTube. Let's flip the game upside down. Okay, so Douglas, we are so appreciative to have you here. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Okay, so first, pleasure. So first, if you can give us a little bit of a background of, just give us your background.
Yeah. So, I'm an immigrant from Korea, and I came to the U.S. To study engineering because that's what good Asian boys do. I studied biomedical engineering and manufacturing engineering here in Boston. And right out of college, unfortunately, I entered a fairly big recession where there really weren't any rich engineering jobs to be had at that time. So I did the next best thing, which was to become an entrepreneur. And I joined a very young software company at that time as employee number 6. And that company, I ended up staying for about 10 years, and we raised a large amount of venture capital from IBM and Morgan Stanley and Highland Capital. And eventually I started running all of Western Europe and Latin America for that company. And we had an exit event in 1999, and I came back to the U.S. and started and failed a software company that crashed during the dot-com crash. Learned probably the most valuable lessons during that period. And then I joined a company called Pegasystems, where I eventually met my wife there. And I ended up working there for 12 years, entered the company when stock price was around $2 a share. And over those 12 years, I helped the company grow and pivot into different lines of business, starting the cloud business for the company, and grew revenues to about $550 million when I left. And
that's all?
Yeah. And the equity, that $2 per share equity, grew into we grew about 3,000% over that time. And then after that, I became a startup and venture capital advisor and chief commercial officer. And I've been working with a bunch of Boston, San Francisco, and New York-based startups, including Cogito, where we've been growing about 160% year over year. We're backed by Goldman Sachs and Salesforce.com, and also a company called TextIQ based in New York City. That's actually in the legal space.
And the Cogito, is that where you spend most of your time?
Today, yes. Today. Yeah. And also work with a bunch of various seed stage venture capital companies in the area. So, yeah.
Cool. So could you tell us a little bit about Cogito and what they do and what you do there?
So I played the role of chief commercial officer and chief growth officer, which really is about helping the company commercialize a bunch of capabilities and technologies and package it so that we can actually sell it to the enterprise sector and drive meaningful business outcomes for those companies. And at the end of the day, enterprises buy technology because it delivers a business value to them that they can cost justify. It's either got to help them make more money or it's got to help them save money as a way for them to justify it. It's been a great ride over the last 5 years. And
what exactly do they do, Douglas?
Mostly the companies used in the space of customer care, helping organizations in the call center deliver better customer care for their customers.
What's an
So
example? So if I
an
call
example,
in,
yeah, an example might be, you have probably on average, a consumer bank or an insurance company, a large insurance company might probably get somewhere in the region of about anywhere between 30 to 50 million phone calls a year from customers. And sometimes those customer engagement conversations can get thorny, can get difficult, and can get emotional. And our software helps the customer service agent maintain their composure, maintain their empathy, by giving them these little nudges that they can see on their screen as they're speaking to help coach and guide them so that they can be more empathetic on those calls.
it's unbelievable. So, like an example, I sound angry. What is it going to say on the customer service agent screen?
Show some empathy at this moment.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible. And so how much are you involved with giving feedback like from your customers who are the enterprise companies back to the developers?
So, so this is a very, very big part of what we do, as obviously we get a lot of feedback from customers, and we have to incorporate, and we learn a lot from the conversations and the quality of those conversations. And so it's constantly refining what we call our machine learning models so that the models get smarter and the coaching the agents get becomes smarter.
What are some of like the things that your common person or somebody who's not involved in AI might not know that that you've learned from seeing this stuff, like that just is fascinating to know about these conversations that happen?
Probably the most interesting thing is, as it turns out, um, the way we communicate with one another as humans hasn't evolved that much from the time we were animals. Um, you know, we have flight or fight responses. We get very animated and excited, and our voice changes when we're excited, or when we're angry, or when we're sad, or when we're tense. All those things show up in the way we speak. And before the advent of the power of computational technology that we have, it was very difficult to analyze those signals in real time. But thanks to cloud computing and all the advances in computer technology, you can really, really understand and unpack all the different hidden signals in human voice.
Are there any things that are coming out, let's say in the next, let's say 5 to 10 years that that are going to come out that are just going to be completely game changing
I
that
think,
you can
I
good.
think in general, the industry is going to see wholesale changes in the way that work gets done. I'll talk a little bit about that because it's very relevant in what I consider the end of the world as we know it.
Okay, so let's talk about your guiding principles. What are some of the guiding principles that have been foundational to your success over the years?
I think there are a couple of things, which is there's a very common saying, which is uh, probably the most destructive sentence ever uttered in the halls of companies is we always did it this way. And
Absolutely.
I think one of the most important things that has helped me guide the way I operate is thinking from what I call first principles. And first principles means that um, while you hold true and you learn and you recall the experiences of all of what you've learned over the years and what you've studied in history, you don't let that necessarily block how you approach new problems. And first principles thinking means that basically being able to take a clean white sheet of paper and come up with solutions that uh, may not have existed before.
Okay, that makes sense. And
The the other is, I think, don't complain about a problem unless you have a proposed solution to it. I think it's very cathartic for people to just wallow in their problems and complain. But I find that in work, my ask of people is always have a proposed solution to that problem. It
Does
may
it
not be the right
matter?
solution.
Does it matter like where they sit in the hierarchy of the company? So like, do you take that same approach whether it's a C-level employee versus an hourly employee?
No, no. I really appreciate how everyone has a perspective in where they are and what functions that they perform. I find that people closest to the work have the best perspective and sometimes the most innovative solutions to those problems.
Interesting. Okay, and then how do you, with all your years of experience, what would be your best advice for how to prioritize one's work? I know there's not a wholesale solution for everybody, but what have you found to be effective in terms of just prioritizing work?
I think probably the most important thing, the way I think about approaching work, and a lot of people have different philosophies and ideas, right? There are some people that are like, wake up at 3 a.m., hit the gym, put on motivational tapes and like conquer the world. Other people are like, keto diet and sleep 10 hours and other, there are all these
Right.
various different frameworks. But I think at the end of the day, people have to do what's right for them. They should try different rubrics, but I think everybody is different. But the guiding philosophy, I think, instead of giving people kind of straight guideposts, instead of that, I think what works better for people is if you give them broad frameworks that they can then fit for themselves. And the broad framework that I think about is basically a 4x4 matrix. And the
When
four
you
by
say
four, yeah,
when you say 4x4, how are we visualizing are you going to give us, how should
yeah,
we visualize that?
yeah. Actually, let me restate that. It's a 2x2 matrix.
Okay.
So there are four quadrants in it.
Okay.
Um, on the upper right-hand corner is the stuff that's very urgent and strategic. And that's the
What is
stuff that,
urgent and how do you define urgent and strategic?
for example, something like your next year's business plan, which your investors are asking for today. Or if you look around the corner and you go, and you have contingency planning that you need to do given this health and financial crisis that we're in today. And then you attack the stuff that's urgent and tactical.
Let me stop you for a second. Just back to
Yeah.
define, what does strategic mean?
Strategic are things that are will carry you through to the long term. Stuff that is that you cannot afford to procrastinate and are important to either your health or your wealth or the company's longevity or the company's growth plans or stuff that actually really matters in the long term.
Things that carry foundational shifts in what you're doing.
Yes,
Okay.
well
So
put.
now to the second. That's the number one priority. What's the sort of second priority?
Is urgent and tactical. And
What does tactical mean?
tactical is the stuff that uh, you have payroll to make next month, and these are urgent issues that you need to address right now.
Like
Um,
actually task driven items.
that's right. That's right. And it's very tempting to spend all your time on the urgent and tactical issues and never get to the strategic ones. And what you'll find if you do that is that as you're clawing through the endless list of urgent tactical issues, is that you're solving these piecemeal problems, but you're never attacking or addressing the long-term issues that are actually going to carry you and the company through to the next phase of growth. And it takes mental discipline to be able to do that. But I find it easier if you can actually write it out and move things, because things are going to move between the quadrants, between urgent and strategic and urgent and tactical. But you have to have the ability to be able to move across quadrants, right?
Okay. And then what's the third quadrant?
Non-urgent and strategic.
Non-urgent and strategic. Okay.
It's not urgent. Yes, it could help you long term, but it's not urgent. It's nothing you need to deal with today.
And then I imagine the fourth quadrant is non-urgent, non-tactical, or non-strategic.
That's right.
Both.
Non-urgent and tactical stuff.
Yeah.
And what I find, and unfortunately, a lot of teams, as I look through, when I do team meetings or when I go through strategic planning, it's incredible how much time people spend on non-urgent and tactical stuff that feels good because you feel like you're getting something done.
Right.
But I'll give you an example. I once found a VP level person worrying about things related to where the team was going to, what type of what do you call club planning. So when high performers go on a company sponsored club trip to Jamaica or somewhere, it was clear we were going to have a shortfall in the second and third quarter, and he was spending a lot of time around vacation planning, rather.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good example. Okay. So now the elephant in the room. So while I'm interested in hearing your opinion about how COVID is going to affect your industry, I also want to hear just your general perspective, because you're just somebody I look to for guidance on these big things. So just sort of take the floor. I'm curious your take on it, and obviously I'll chime in when I feel like it makes sense.
Sure. I think in this time of crisis, look, I'm the product of a war generation. My parents lived through both the Second World War and the Korean War. And some of that DNA, it's impossible not to have that framework in your mind, because you grow up learning about the stories of their hardships and how they had to shelter in place and hunker down during those times. But you eventually learn how resilient people actually are, and I think that's the very important thing that, as I see this crisis unfolding, is the need for us to recognize a couple things. One is we cannot live with what I call blind optimism and hopefulness. It is brutally bad out there. And I'm reminded of something called the Stockdale Paradox. And the Stockdale Paradox is a story. It's not a story. It's a paradox that's named after Admiral Jim Stockdale, who coined this term because what he found. He was the highest ranking officer to be shot down over Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and he spent almost 8 years in Hanoi Hilton and was tortured over 20 times. And he emerged from that crisis to explain as to who made it and who didn't. And he explained that the ones that didn't make it out were the optimists. And that's why it's called the Stockdale Paradox, because you would think, what? And he said the optimists were these people that basically said, we're going to be out. We're going to be out by Easter. Easter would come and go.
That sounds familiar.
I know. Literally, they would say, we're going to be out. We're going to be done by Easter, and then Easter would come and go, And then it became, we're going to be out by Christmas. Christmas would come and go.
And what's wrong with thinking that you're going to be out by Easter or Christmas, Douglas?
Basically, you're living just on hope. You're not facing and confronting the reality of the situation you're in and finding ways to deal with it. And literally, the quote from Stockdale, from Admiral Stockdale, is, "You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality, whatever they might be." And so he, for example, developed ways to communicate in code between the prisoners. He developed ways to deceive his captors and deceive interrogators. And he dealt with the problems, as it were, and came up with solutions to deal with the problems that he had, that he was facing. And I find too many times, sometimes in organizations, in administrations, etc., because the leadership or the people want to have this blind faith of optimism, it drowns out the people that want to confront this reality, and it allows only the people that are what I call yes men and yes women, who want to support this hopeful optimism, to thrive, and all the people that want to confront the reality are drowned out as being too negative. In fact, it's got nothing to do with being negative. It's about seeing the world as it is, not the way you wish it were.
Sure. And so how do you what advice do you have for people in light of that being something that you hold near and dear and true, which I do too?
Yeah.
What are some ways in business you see, like practical ways to address the situation going forward with the realities with your employees, with your employers, your customers? How do we deal with all these things in a broad way?
Yeah. So I don't have specific answers for every single situation that someone's in today, or every business that someone's in today. But I think the things that we have to confront as reality is, if we look back at the 2008 financial crisis, it took about 4 to 5 quarters, so about a year and 3 months, for the economy and gross domestic product to actually start to rise again in a meaningful manner. But this is the key thing that I want to highlight is, yes, it will be bad for the next foreseeable year, but the other way you can look at it is, it always bounces back. It always comes
Yeah.
back.
And I think that isn't that part of the principle you're talking about, which is, it's not, when you confront the most brutal facts, it doesn't mean that the most brutal fact is that the world is changing forever now. But that doesn't mean that we don't have to sort of characterize that as a bad thing. It just is what it is. And we're just, and so, because we've seen other moments like this in history, like you mentioned, war. What types of things have you seen come out of moments like that, where we could look to for sort of the positive side of things?
I look back at, I'm a student of history, and I look back at what happened post World War II. World War II was an opportunity for actually America to become the superpower that it is today, both from an economic and military perspective. The level of industrial output and mechanization to prepare for that war effort created America what it is today. It created the highway system. It created so many different things that we live with today that we take for
Suburbia.
granted. It created suburbia because returning vets had to find places to live, and it created the innovation from a company called Lewitt and Sons to mechanize the production of homes, creating the American suburb. It changed us forever. It allowed the McDonald brothers to create McDonald's. You had to feed a hungry population, cheap protein, and they had 15-cent burgers. And a lot of innovation comes out of these types of crises. And as the world changes to a new world, you could argue 9/11 changed the world forever in the way we think about air travel, and it changed geopolitics forever. Um, but the
What's this
way,
going to do? What do you see this doing? Do you think that, one of the main things is obviously probably accelerating work from home, maybe commercial office space is going to sort of get devalued. What do you see coming out of this?
I think for the next 2 years, and maybe for the distant future, humans, if you were on the fence with e-commerce and buying online, you're over that hump right away because it's the only it's the only option right now.
If you're one of the last few people that don't have Prime, you now have Prime.
That's right. Yeah. If you have a distributed workforce and you decided, I want everyone at a headquarters and I want everybody working in office, you're now embracing the reality that actually people can get stuff done, work from home. I don't think we are going to have nearly the air travel routes and rail routes that we have today. I think that you can see 20-30% cuts in air travel, and for the long term.
Yeah.
I think hotel capacity that we have today, you could cut 20% of that hotel capacity, and I think the world would be fine. We've overbuilt in the last few years as we headed towards this world where we thought there would be this uninterrupted expansion of economic growth. This is not the reality. It's not how the world works.
Yeah. And you're talking about travel, and in your job, I always see you on social media. You're traveling all over the world all the time, and you've been forever. How did you figure out the work-life balance before? Because I always look to you for that type of advice. And then how do you figure it out now when you're stuck in the house?
Yeah. So I would tell you my work-life balance um, is something that I personally struggle with. Um, you know, uh, don't let social media be yeah. But I think now more than ever, I think it's important for us to really understand in a work from home situation the actual work-life balance, because your children, for example, today when they're with you at home, I was putting my daughter to bed the other night, and she said to me, um, I don't like it when daddy's on calls all day. And I said, but, Isabella, normally you'd be in school when I'm in the office. And she said, I know, but I'm not in school right now.
Mm.
And so, I think you in your, I have been much more purposeful in my calendaring on finding spaces for to actually spend with the family during this crazy time.
That's good advice. Okay, we're moving on to deals of the week. I'm going to give you my deal and then give me yours, Douglas. So, my deal of the week is find mentors like Douglas. So, they're out there, they're willing, but they are not going to knock on your door. I think it's very easy for us to become complacent with the people that we know, and even just taking for granted the people that we know and not really reaching out to them. I find that most people are willing to give you the time, but they're not going to come to you. You got to go out there and ask them for assistance, and then they'll do it gladly. Show them the appreciation for it, and they'll keep feeding you that good knowledge. Douglas, what's your deal of the week?
I think my deal of the week really is about um, in this time uh, for me, the best way that I'm coping with this current situation is actually proactively reaching out to people that I think need help. And probably put about 20% of my calendar on a weekly basis, um, helping other entrepreneurs, helping investors, helping job seekers with their personal journey or with their professional journey, and helping them navigate through this crisis.
That's a great deal.
Yeah, if you're ever feeling down, go help somebody. It'll
That
snap
is
you out of it.
incredible. That might be my favorite deal of the week to date. So thank you, Douglas. All right, so we're going to do a quick legal tip of the week. It's sponsored by my firm, Smith and Benowitz. We do personal injury, employment, and class actions. And so my legal tip of the week is when you're negotiating, it's very easy to fall into the habit of starting to negotiate before you actually understand the world within which you're negotiating. So it's comes intuitive for a lot of us, and it might sound obvious, but don't start negotiating until you understand the world of the material terms that you're negotiating. So a lot of times, I'll take this much. Well, later in the negotiation, you'll find out that the other side requires a material term that wasn't even the mix. So it's kind of like the New York shell game where the cups are moving around. You want to avoid the New York shell game. You want to know all the universe of terms before you start negotiating, and then starting to negotiate from there. That's my legal tip of the week. Douglas, I'm going to skip your legal tip of the week because 1, you're not a lawyer, and 2, we're running out of time. So unless you have something while I move on. Okay, so here we go. Let's read this. We have a great company that sponsors us. It's called Rock Paper. So we all know it's scary when you sign up for a subscription, but a trial period requires your credit card. You know that's annoying, right, Douglas?
Yeah.
Okay, wouldn't it be great if you never had to submit your actual credit card number, or you could block the merchant from charging you until you've approved it?
Yes.
Okay, well, Douglas, that's how it is with Rock Paper. You're able to do that. I want you to go to rockpaper.com, R-O-C-K, R-O-C-K-P-A-P-R.com, R-O-C-K-P-A-P-R, and join the movement. Okay, Douglas, we really appreciate your time. If you could please tell us where the people can find you online, how they can reach out to you, and any parting words you have for the LawFlip audience.
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn most actively. It's Douglas Kim on LinkedIn. The parting words I would share with everyone is this. Don't be defined by someone else's narrative.
Ooh.
It would have been very easy, and I lived this through personally, right? Because it was very easy for me as a Asian math and science nerd to fall into this narrative, introvert, nerd. There's another narrative that's very easy.
Douglas, your camera. There you go. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a other narrative that you can fall into where someone might say he's lazy, or he's not organized, or she's mean. Those are narratives that someone else has defined for you, and you cannot let someone else's narrative define who you are and live through that narrative.
That is incredible parting advice, Douglas. Thank you so much. So what did we learn today? We learned that we're going to be okay, but we have to confront our worst facts. We learned that just because you're Asian doesn't mean you're going to fit into a small box. Douglas is one of the most interesting, smart people that I know in my life, and just an incredible human being. And I think that not being defined by other people's narratives is probably the best advice you could possibly give to anybody, and it's so true. Not by your family, not by anybody, not by your best friend for 30 years. You have to make your own path. And I really that's really kind of like the whole spirit of why we started the podcast, is that everybody thinks of lawyers as these miserable people. And frankly, a lot of times they are. Let's just be honest about it. But I think you'll sort of know that, like, from when we met, Douglas, I wasn't like your normal lawyer.
No.
And but it took time for me to figure the whole thing out and really figure out how I was going to live my life and operate. And you were one of those people that really helped me get out of that box. And so Thank you so much for coming on, Douglas. We really appreciate it. And I think a lot of people get a lot out of this. So thank you so much, Douglas. We appreciate it.
Much love to the family.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
LawFlip, objection, Your Honor. Turn the game upside down.
Okay, so Ariane, they're asking where they could find us. So for LawFlip, it's at LawFlip and LawFlip.com. For Smith & Benowitz, our law firm, which does personal injury employment and class actions, you can find us at Smith Benowitz and SmithBenowitz.com. For the personal stuff, like where you're really going to find the juicy stuff, at Benjy Smith and BenjySmith.com. At Wages Guru and LewisBenowitz.com for Lewis. Oh, so LawFlip is produced, directed, and edited by the young legend Ariane Tabibian. Visual effects and compositions by another young legend, Oren Azad. Intro music provided by Pen Practice. Pen Practice, what is it? Premium instrumentals for upcoming artists by the music industry's top producers. For more info, visit penpracticemusic.com. I had so much fun recording the intro song with my man Hilton Deuce Wright. Looking forward to hearing more and more from Pen Practice. So the LawFlip identity, this hot logo that you're looking at, created by Garrett Whiston and Travis Nagel. Special thank you to Shai and Seth from the Horwitz Marketing Agency. A huge thank you to Aaron and Vanessa from Smith & Benowitz for endlessly dealing with all of our podcast bullshit. And lastly, a huge thank you to our beautiful wives, Julie and Lisa, for supporting our vision, and all the love to all of our 4 boys combined. Disclaimer, this podcast is made available by Smith & Benowitz for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is only intended to provide general information and opinions about legal and other concepts, and is not intended to be used as a source of legal advice or relied on for legal advice. By listening to this podcast, you understand that no attorney-client relationship is being formed between you and Smith & Benowitz or any of its attorneys. This podcast should not be used as a substitute for competent legal advice from a licensed professional attorney in your state.